A very good morning to one and all who have joined the session today. The theme of today's session is disability rights and advocacy, which would include discussing the provisions of Uncrpd, that is, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, with foreign delegates, and coming up with various points to figure out how can disability rights be implemented in this world. It will also include a panel discussion on the disability rights and the history of the same in India. With this panel discussion, the predicted outcomes can be a way for advocating for disability rights, making persons with disabilities aware of their rights, and many other issues. Before we start the session, you are requested to adhere to the following rules. First, attendees need to rename to their original names as given at the time of registration. Second, attendees need to be on mute. Third, no attendee is allowed to unmute their mic to speak unless asked to do so. If it still happens once, a warning will be given to the attendee, and on second time, the attendee will be removed from the meeting and will not be allowed to enter on any condition. Fourth, attendees can turn on their videos if they want. Fifth, attendees can type in the chat box for any confusion, questions, or issues. We are blessed with the gracious presence of our speakers today, Dr. Maheshwar Singh.
Good morning, everyone. Now I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Maheshwar Singh. Maheshwar Singh is a professor of political science at National Law University, and he's been teaching political science and international relations for nearly 2 decades. He has been with NLU Delhi since 2009, and he holds a doctoral degree in diplomacy and international security from JNU New Delhi. Professor Singh is also the director of Center for Studies in Disability and Law at NLU New Delhi. He has been a visiting professor at a number of universities in Europe. Professor Singh has researched and published in the areas of water laws, disability laws, and policy, and development induced displacement. Professor Singh also works as a consultant to prominent institutions of the government, and we are very grateful to have him on board with us. On to you, Dr. Professor Singh.
Thank you very much for your introduction. And also, at the outset, I would like to thank Bhumika Trust and the collaborating universities of this international conference on disability. As has been pointed out in the beginning by the introducer, that this session will deal largely with the provisions of CRPD, which was signed in 2000 and which came into being in 2006, and India being signatory of International Disability Convention has formulated a conformity legislation in 2016, almost 10 years post the International Convention on Disability. I do not have a prepared speech or a PowerPoint presentation to talk about the provisions of International Disability Convention and also the corresponding provisions included in our 2016 law. Now, the story of people with disability is an endless one. Endless in the sense that it is the story of discrimination and inequality. And no wonder the antithesis of discrimination and inequality finds its place in International Disability Convention as the promotion of principle of equality, non-discrimination. All right. So within that framework, uh, the International Disability Convention, all right, has really sort of brought to the fore the situation of people with disability, uh, uh, which is people with disability across different jurisdictions. And when I say jurisdictions, I mean that in different countries. Now, we can talk extensively about CRPD, but I will sort of restrict my conversation on the disability rights and advocacy of such rights in at least in two areas, which is education and employment. Right? It is very well established in literature that education is an important instrument for human flourishing. And it is as important for, or rather more important for, people with disability. All right. We all very well know, at least in our country, of the total pupil who take admission in a school, a very, very, very minuscule percentage of that sort of reach at the university. All right. And when we talk about people with disability, a minuscule or a very, very small percentage of people with disability reach up to the university level. So that's why I think we must investigate the reasons as to why people with disability find themselves difficult to reach up to the university level. Now, the CPRD talks about the inclusive education system. All right. What is inclusive education system? Inclusive education system, in the simple meaning of inclusive education system, is people with disability are not excluded from general education system on the basis of their disability. All right. So this is a very, very high sounding principle. And obviously, on account of disability, people with disability particularly, should not be denied access to education. Denial of access to education is denial of justice to people with disability. All right. But inclusive education system may mean different things to different people. Insofar as people with disability is concerned, inclusive education system requires the schools at the very basic level, all right, to create enabling infrastructure so that people with disability, all right, are able to sort of realize their educational rights. Do we have such infrastructure even after the passage of 2016 disability legislation present in our schools? My answer to this question, unfortunately, is no. One, the schools are sort of physically inaccessible to people with disability. Number two is, even when people with disability, all right, get admitted in schools to realize their educational rights, all right, they are unable to sort of really uh, 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 enjoy their educational rights for the simple reason that the education or educationists in school, and here I mean the teachers in school, do not have or do not possess the necessary training to provide education to people with disability. All right. People with disability in school itself, face all kinds of discrimination at the hands of both the school administration and the teachers as well. All right. As a consequence, what happens is many of them sort of drop out of school at the primary stage itself. And it's very well established in literature on educational rights of people with disability that a large number of them, all right, face discrimination, and as a consequence, they drop themselves out, all right, or they are selected out of the educational system, at least in our country and elsewhere too in other jurisdictions as well. Now, what is to be done about it? Are we serious about it? Is the government sort of seriously intervening in primary educational system or primary education to ensure that people with disability have equal access to educational system and also realize their educational rights? Unfortunately, the answer to this question that I have found out in my research is either minimal or none. I mean, across the board, government institutions pay lip service to the educational rights of people with disability on and off. They will keep sending circulars and notices and other things to mainstream the educational rights of people with disability, both in the school as well as in the university. But there is no follow-up. All right. So it becomes immensely difficult for people with disability to really assert, much less realize their educational rights insofar as inclusive educational system or inclusive education system as enshrined in International Disability Convention is concerned. Now, disability rights activist or disability advocacy faces, to start with, the key question of adequate data on which they can work, both by advocating with the government as well as in the arena of civil society. I mean, for instance, in a city like Delhi, if one looks for data as to how many people with disability are able to access the primary school educational system, the data is simply missing. The data is not available. There is some research here and there, and there is an aggregate data that which also varies from 3.5 to 5% of the total population of India fall in the category of people with disability. But there is no specific or desegregated data as to how many people with disability, and reliable data at that, who are able to sort of exercise their educational rights as enshrined in the International Disability Convention or in 2016 disability legislation of India. All right. For example, we don't know for sure which category of people with disability sort of have access to the schooling system or the school system of free and compulsory education provided by the government. What special sort of facilities has the government sort of created to enable people with disability to enjoy their educational rights in these schools? Now, 2016 legislation sort of divides people with disability into 21 categories. And it's a mammoth category. So it's a minefield field. And each category of people with disability have different set of requirements. Is the state or the government, all right, ensuring that accessibility rights to education is equally provided to people with disability belonging to different categories in schools? Or not? My answer to this question is unfortunately not. And as the dropout rate for whoever goes to school increases, it correspondingly increases the incidence of poverty. Because in literature, it's very well established that people with disability and poverty has an intrinsic, incidences of poverty has an intrinsic linkage. All right. So the first point for disability advocacy or disability rights activist is to generate adequate data on which we can concretely ask the government to ensure that X, Y, Z number of facilities are not available in the school, and those systems which enable, which are enabling systems, enabling institutions must be strengthened. Now, in Chapter 3 of 2016 Disability Act, there is a duty of educational institutions. But educational institutions are linked to the government. So eventually, at the end of it, people with disability are, in order to exercise their rights related to education, must hold the duty bearer accountable for its lapses. All right. It also talks about specific measures to promote and facilitate inclusive education, and then adult education. All right. It's not, the state is not being able to provide the enabling mechanisms so that people with disability can enjoy their educational rights. Forget about it. Adult education. Number 2 is an equally important issue, is the question of employment. You visit any government office, you visit any university, you visit any school system, and you will barely see, all right, people with disability having gainful employment or being employed in these government offices or universities or school systems. All right. And this happens despite the constitutional protection insofar as employment rights of people with disability is concerned. There is an inherent linkage between education and employment. Our employment system is such that it requires certain level of proficiency manifested in terms of degrees to be eligible to apply for employment. When the education system is failing people with disability, how do you expect them to be employed by the state and the government? All right. Number 2 is, even when they're employed, all right, they are being discriminated against at the place of employment. Now, there is definitely in 2016 legislation, following the International Disability Convention, mechanisms to write a complaint to the district disability officers or the nodal officers against discrimination. But people with disability are so disempowered that they find themselves extremely difficult to approach such offices if they are discriminated against in employment. And we do not have concrete data, so to speak. Data is a very important aspect insofar as disability advocacy is concerned, as to how many people with disability and which category of people with disability are part of the labor market. All right. What kind of jobs are being offered to them? For example, universities, I know it as a matter of fact, on a regular basis, university will advertise 4% or 3% of university posts are reserved for people with disability. And more often than not, those posts go on. I mean, right kind of people are not appointed on those posts. All right. And the excuse that the university authorities or the college authorities or public authorities take, that we do not get the uh, get the uh, mm, get the right candidate for the post, and over a period of time they transform those posts reserved for people of disability into general and other kinds of categories. All right. So this is a problem. Uh, we as concerned individuals with disability rights must have, or must be able to somehow, through our research, through our intervention, must be able to collect sort of concrete data insofar as number of people with disability are part of the labor market, to tell the government that this is the state of your protection, and you need to do, and the state needs to do more. Now, all of this are tied together, in my understanding of things, is the attitude of, all right, a particular form of body, all right, which we may call as normal form towards people with disability. And one doesn't have to be a Freud or a psychoanalyst to say that people with disability, all right, or a different body form is kind of looked at as somewhat different from the normal, and therefore they must be discriminated against. So normally, in Rousseauian sense, I mean, people with normal body form have a pity towards disability, but they do not see people with disability as rights-bearing individuals. And that is a very important aspect insofar as people with disability as citizens of this jurisdiction, of this country, and other jurisdictions are concerned. Lastly, may I say that International Disability Convention sort of upholds the slogan, nothing for us without us. So which raises the crucial question of representation. All right. Now, in different layers of government, where is the representation of people with disability? I mean, those who frame laws are so-called, normal body forms. They are barely sensitive to the sufferings of, or the discrimination that people with disability face. And they form laws, without taking all of these specificities, peculiarities into consideration. So finally, in the end, I would say, if disability rights have to see the light at the end of the dark tunnel, all right, and has to get out of cul-de-sac, then disability rights activists or disability advocacy must, in my opinion, ask for representation of disability, or people with disability, at every level of governance. All right, from panchayat to 74th constitutional amendment, to state legislature, and to the union legislature. Unless people are disability find some representation, some voice in the decision-making bodies of the state, disability rights will be neglected and will always be seen from the perspective of people who deserve pity but are not rights bearing citizens. Why I say this? Because rule making or law making is intensely political act, and unless people with disability are part of rule making, rules will be framed, but I wonder they will be sensitive enough, which will ameliorate, which will improve the general condition of people with disability in this country and across the world. I think I'll stop here. I'll be very happy to engage with other colleagues uh, on disability advocacy and disability rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your deep insight. May I now introduce Mr. Rahul Bajaj, sir? Mr. Rahul Bajaj is a senior resident fellow in the Research Director's Office. He is responsible for coordinating research work in Research Director's Office, particularly pertaining to research projects related to COVID-19. He manages with his partnerships with academic institutions, think tanks, and other mutually beneficial partnerships. Sir had studied law at the University of Nagpur, graduating as a gold medalist in the university. After working at Trilegal for a year, he pursued his postgraduate legal education at the University of Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. On returning to India, he clerked for Supreme Court Judge Justice D.Y. Chandrachud before joining Vidhi. I now request Sir to please take over the session and enlighten us.
Thanks very much for that very kind and generous introduction. I'm very grateful to Dr. Mary Sport, Jayant Singh Raghav, and all the other organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. And it's been an honor to listen to the previous speaker. So I will try to incorporate the points that they made as far as I can into to build on what they said in my talk. So what I propose to do is to talk about the CRPD committees, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The committee that monitors implementation of the convention released some concluding observations on India in October 2019 that indicates how far Indian disability rights law and practices are in conformity with the convention. So I propose to take you through the concluding observations of the committee while also referencing my own work and judgments by the Supreme Court along the way that speak to the issues that the committee flagged up. So the first thing that they note is the positive components of India's disability rights legal framework, which have been borrowed from the CRPD itself. And there are three things that they emphasize here: the fact that we guarantee free education under the RPWD Act between the ages of 6 to 18. Whereas under the Right to Education Act, it is only between 6 and 14. So in terms of for children with disabilities, there's a larger period of time for which this protection is granted. The fact that there's been an effort to make electoral processes more accessible. And third, the fact that the new law, RPWD Act, recognizes the principle of non-discrimination and reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation in particular is important because it was not part of the earlier regime explicitly. But then there are a number of causes of concern that they also highlight, which I would like to dwell on for a minute. The first one that they talk about is the prevalence of the medical model of disability when it comes to identifying who it is who deserves the protections that come from having a disability. And I'd just like to quote what they say in this respect. This is at para 6A of the concluding observations. They say the prevalence of the medical model of disability in legislation, public policy, and attitudes concerning persons with disabilities particularly in the multiple assessments and certifications of disability and the requirement for different assessments to access services in the community. So they are focusing not just on how that medical model forms the basis for whatever laws and policies we have, but also how certification, how we have unduly burdensome certification requirements that you need to meet in order to be considered a person with a disability. And this point, I think, really comes through quite well in a recent Supreme Court judgment that was delivered by Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and A.S. Bopanna last week, called Avni Prakash versus National Testing Agency and others. I'll just take a moment to share the facts of the case and what the court held. So this was a case involving a candidate who is affected by writer's cramp or dysgraphia, as it is called, which is a disorder that prevents you from being able to write in a clear and coherent fashion. For this reason, she wanted to get extra time, which is normally allowed as per the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment guidelines of 29th August 2018, which say that for 3 hours of an exam, you're entitled to the grant of 1 hour of extra time. And she did have a disability certificate to indicate her condition, which was that she had, in fact, a benchmark disability, as the law calls it, which is more than 40% of a disability that cannot be measured in quantifiable terms. And she had submitted all this certificate, and went into the exam thinking that she would be granted this extra time. But when the exam actually happened, her paper was snatched away after the completion of 3 years with regular candidates, and regular, I say in quotation marks. And she was not given the extra time that is entitled to her. So she approached the Bombay High Court about this, because obviously that affected the number of marks, the number of questions she could attempt, and her overall rank. But the Bombay High Court, in the High Court, the National Testing Agency argued that candidates had to furnish a prescribed certificate, which was granted by a recognized center as per their information bulletin. And this is different from the disability certificate. And because Avni Prakash had not furnished that certificate, she could not be given this extra time. And they said that if you give us this certificate, we will consider your case. Now, when she went to some centers to obtain the certificate, what she found out is that that certificate is required not at the stage of admission, not at the stage of giving the exam, but at the stage of seeking admission to medical colleges in order for the grant of a reservation to be secured. And this is best clarified. This is best indicated by the fact that in order to get the certificate, or in fact on the certificate, the marks that you secured in the exam have to be indicated. Now, obviously, how can those marks be indicated until you've actually given the exam and your result has come? So therefore, the National Testing Agency erred in demanding this certification at the exam stage as a precondition to the grant of extra time. And the Bombay High Court said, as in she indicated all this in the High Court, but they refused to buy her argument. And even as they acknowledged that the NTA's requirement was that the NTA's lawyer had been misled by by the instructing parties in the NTA, they nonetheless dismissed her case, saying that she hadn't given this certificate. And they went so far as to say that she had not been able to substantiate her request for extra time owing to a purported disability status. So, in a sense, not in a sense, essentially casting doubt on whether or not she was a person with a disability in the first place. But then, when the matter came before the Supreme Court, they adopted a much more progressive and forward-looking approach. They said that this certificate had to be given only at the admission stage, and the NTA had erred in asking for it at the exam stage. And they looked at the case through the lens of reasonable accommodation and inclusive education, and said that this was a form of reasonable accommodation for the candidate. And one other very progressive thing that came out of this judgment, not really directly relevant to the certification point, but worth mentioning nonetheless, is that the NTA said that now we've declared the result and the counseling will also start. So we can't really overturn the apple cart now. And therefore, too bad that, she didn't get extra time. We can't help it now. But the court rejected that argument. It said that the NTA can't be granted a free pass on the basis that, well, these individual injustices are necessary consequence of an examination of this scale and magnitude. You have to recognize that we are talking about a particular individual rights which can't be sent into the oblivion just because it's going to be difficult and complicated for the NTA to figure out a way to compensate her. And they've asked the NTA now to come up with a compensatory mechanism within a period of 2 weeks. So this is one thing I wanted to point out. Now, going back to the CRPD committee concluding observations, the next thing they talk about is the use of problematic terminology like Divyang and mentally ill. And as regard Divyang, they say that it continues to remain highly controversial in India. And here again, let me say a little about the Supreme Court judgment in Vikash Kumar versus UPSC and others, where the court picked up on this language and said that persons with disabilities have to be referred to in language that is dignifying and empowering, not patronizing or that puts them on some sort of a pedestal or even in a cage, like either treating them as being a cut above the rest or being somehow lesser humans. You can't have either of the two. And there was this lawyer in Madras named M. Karpagam who filed a petition asking that the government be directed not to use the word Divyang, but the High Court said that, well, let's focus on things on the ground rather than getting caught up in debates on terminology. So while they understood where she was coming from, they refused to grant her relief. Now, the flaw in that argument, in that holding, is that the High Court views these two things as being mutually exclusive, which they are not. Nobody's saying that you don't focus on substantive issues, rights, and entitlements of the disabled. But equally, you have to focus on the language with which you refer to them, because that, in a way, is indicative of how you think of them. So both these issues can be pursued at once, and one hopes that some court will hold the government to account for the use of this derogatory terminology, really, which is rooted in a medical model and in religious thought. Then the next thing they talk about, which I want to point out, is so about this certification and assessment requirement. One argument that is often deployed by respondent governments or testing agencies is the argument as to misuse, right? So they say that, look, if we were not to have this requirement, anybody would be able to get the benefits that come from having a disability. So we need to ensure that we're able to screen bad apples out of the system and screen bad apples and keep them out of the system. And therefore, this is necessary to achieve that end. Now, that argument is obviously valid. Like, no one is suggesting that people who do not have an actual disability and a disability based need be granted extra time or access to a scribe. But that doesn't mean that you deprive those who are lawfully entitled to their rights of their who have lawful entitlements to claim these accommodations of their rights. I mean, so the way to deal with that is to have a screening mechanism, yes, and then after that you can deal with individual cases of misuse as and when they arise from time to time. And this is exactly what the Supreme Court says in Vikash Kumar, where the government argued that, so in that case, the petitioner again had writer's cramp like Avni Prakash. His disability was 6%, and the court and the argument essentially was that this is too low a percentage to be granted a scribe. But actually, his disability is such that even at that level, it required access to a scribe in order for him to be able to appear in the exam in the best possible way. Um, so the answer can't be to deprive a person of their lawful entitlements because some people might want to game the system. Now, the next thing that I want to point out is that they also talk about the need for organizations that work in this space to shift their focus from care, treatment, and protection towards the removal of environmental and attitudinal barriers rather than being rooted in a sort of sympathy pity based model. The next strand they pick up on is the nothing about us without us line of thought, which I'm sure you all are all too familiar with by this point, as to how we need to ensure the meaningful participation of disabled people and organizations representing them in any decisions that are made about them. And they say here, and I'm going to quote what they say: the committee is concerned that the participation of organizations of persons with disabilities is not prioritized in decision making processes relating to them, and that their opinions are not reflected in the results of such processes. And therefore, they say that they should be given due weight and consultation. Now, again, the Vikash Kumar judgment picks up on this, and it says, that you need to have meaningful participation of persons with disabilities. You have to give them voice in the process. You can't foist decisions down their throats. And this you see playing out time and time again when the government comes out with draft guidelines on disability rights issues. The central government this is where they ask for feedback and public comments, and only those who are well connected with the government end up finding out about these standards. So there needs to be a mechanism to ensure that these consultation processes are truly inclusive. The next thing they pick up on, and I'm also conscious of the fact that I might have limited time, so do point out if you would like me to, skip over certain things or say the rest of my remarks in brief. So the next thing they point out is the absence of a constitutional prohibition on disability-based discrimination, because as you are aware, under the Constitution, Articles 14 through 16, which talk about equality rights, do not contain disability as an explicitly prohibited ground of discrimination, unlike caste, religion, race, sex, place of birth, for instance. So they say that there needs to be a constitutional prohibition on disability, and also problematize Section 3(3) of the RPWD Act, which says that while, of course, the default rule is that you can't discriminate against a disabled person, this rule does not apply where the discrimination is a legitimate means of attaining a proportionate aim, or the other way around, a proportionate means of attaining a legitimate aim. So, therefore, they say that this gives the government a carte blanche to engage in discrimination as long as they're able to show that what they're doing is proportionate, and they ask that this provision be repealed. And of course, we can go into the details of that, but for now, I'll just flag this up as a point for reflection. Then the next thing that they point out is the absence of measures to counteract multiple and intersecting discrimination. So essentially, intersectionality, right, where you have, let's say, a woman with a disability who is a Dalit, or as in someone in whose case gender, disability, caste come together to compound their disadvantage and make them further more vulnerable than they would be if it was just on one of these grounds. So here again, I would like to share with you one Supreme Court judgment from earlier this year, which discusses the issue of intersectionality concerning disabled people at length. And the case is called Patanjamal Valley versus the state of Andhra Pradesh. It was a two-judge bench decision of Justice Chandrachud and AP and M.R. Shah. And this case concerned a rape against a blind scheduled caste 27-year-old, 19-year-old woman that was committed by a friend of her brother's. And in this case, this was a textbook case of intersectionality where the woman's caste, gender, and disability combined to amplify her vulnerability. And the court really took the opportunity to talk about how cases of intersectional violence need to be dealt with, how there needs to be greater training and sensitization amongst relevant actors, the police, the prison, the police, prosecutors, judges, etc., who are dealing with these kinds of cases, and they issued a series of directions to the National Judicial Academy and state judicial academies to conduct training and sensitization on these issues. And they also pointed out how the testimony of survivor or victim with a disability can't be discredited on the basis of their disability, as had been suggested in one previous judgment of the Supreme Court, at least, and as Saptarshi Mandal has written about quite evocatively. Then they also talk about the need to not only recognize intersectional and multiple discrimination. I see that there is a comment. Well, let me just address it before moving forward. So this committee is like I said at the outset, the committee that monitors compliance with the CRPD. If that committee monitors compliance with the convention internationally. I mean, it doesn't their comments aren't directly enforceable in India, obviously, but they do have they do have an impact in terms of shaping discourse. Courts can rely on them in their judgments. Folks like you and I can refer to them in these kinds of conferences. So I wouldn't say that it's just just something that they write on a piece of paper which doesn't have any value. It does have value in shaping discourse, judicial thinking, and popular opinion also, if it is properly channelized. If there are any other questions, do let me know. So yeah, I won't go into the indirect discrimination point now, but just to say that too is something that the Supreme Court has picked up on earlier this year and recognized in a case. This had nothing to do with disability. Uh, I would be grateful if somebody could collate the questions and put them to me at the end, because the difficulty is that since I'm referencing my own notes as I'm going along, it's difficult for me to follow two audio channels at the same time, which is my own notes and the comments that are coming in. So I can't go to the comments on my own now, but if one of you could just take me through them once I'm done talking, that will be helpful.
It will be done. It will be done, Rahul. You can go ahead.
Yes, thanks a lot. So yeah, I was talking about how this issue of indirect discrimination was recognized by the Supreme Court in a judgment earlier this year. Not in the context of disability, but it is something that can have a really positive impact in terms of confronting disability-based discrimination also going forward. And this is a case called Natisha versus the Union of India, which we can talk about more later on if you would like to. Then they talk about the need for awareness raising and sensitization, and especially point out how in rural areas disability is still seen as an outcome of fate, and this is of a piece with the idea of calling the disabled Divyang, which is sort of the other end of the spectrum, really. And also the regressive negative portrayal of the disabled in the media, and the use of derogatory and discriminatory terminal and remarks by political leaders when referencing persons with disabilities. Now, one important thing that they pick up on is accessibility, right? And they talk about how there's been slow progress in monitoring accessibility of transport, physical environment, and information and communication technology, including government websites, where you're not checking how disabled friendly they are. Now, here there are a few examples that I'd like to share with you that I'm working on right now and have done some work on, and I'm aware of basically. The first is, the Office of the Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. Their own website isn't like the PDFs that they upload their website aren't accessible to persons to people who are blind or visually challenged who use screen readers, right? So let alone other government websites. Now, what the issue with the CCPD's website is that whenever they send you notices in a case. I recently found this out because I had filed a case in that office against the income tax portal, which has now become less accessible. And the notice that I got in that matter was as an image-based PDF, so I couldn't access it without having to OCR it myself. And also, on a monthly basis, the CCPD's office uploads the reports of all the cases, all the judgments that they have delivered in that month. And that also, they do in a way that you can't access it on your own, like as a visual challenged person, or through using Acrobat Reader. You can only do it through some other ways, which aren't straightforward, right? Like many people would just take it as being inaccessible and move on. So unless you're really tech savvy, you will not be able to figure out how to do that. So I have brought this to their attention, and they say that it will be addressed soon. So I hope it will. Now, the other example is the standards that were released. So nowadays, the government is releasing a number of standards on several facets of accessibility and reason and other facilities that are to be provided to the disabled to make different things more disabled friendly. And two examples in recent times were the draft civil aviation standard that they had released in October. On making civil aviation more disabled friendly. And the document, the PDF initially was an image-based PDF, right? So even before releasing standards on disability, they didn't care for accessibility. Only after it was brought to their attention and after some back and forth, they fixed it. Second example is the standards that were released on making television broadcasts disabled friendly for the hearing impaired. And that also initially they released a horrible sort of PDF which no one could make sense of with a screen reader, and then they recognized their error and released an updated version. I mean, of course, I'm not saying that we should despair about this, because eventually we have to bring it to their attention and get them to fix it. But that just indicates to you how deep the rot runs when it comes to the lack of awareness about accessibility. And then the third and final example, how much time do I have left, by the way?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was about to say, if it would be great if you could round up your arguments in a few minutes, sir.
Okay, 2 to 3 minutes, is that fine?
Yes, yes, sure, sir.
Fair enough. All right. So, I have been working on private apps and websites. So, from everything, right? From apps like, Practo for consulting doctors, and Dunzo for, booking groceries, Zomato, Paytm. A number of these apps and websites are inaccessible to the blind and to the disabled more generally. So I recently started working on recently started trying to trying to work with the developers of these apps to make them more accessible, failing which to take legal action against them. So, and of course, if any of you are interested to provide, and Dr. Mary Sport is very much aware of this initiative himself, but if any of you would like to provide any support in that endeavor, please do reach out to me, and I can share my email address with you in the chat after I'm done. So, that that again shows to you like how much work we still need to do in that area. And they talk about in the concluding observations how we need to make sure that we embed accessibility into procurement processes and implement the RPWD Act on this point more firmly. All right, fair enough. Now what I propose to do is to just point out two final things and then I'll close. One thing they talk about is in the context of the rights of women and girls with disabilities, they talk about how we have so two things, right? One, we have this 92F, section 92F in the Act, which says that which does not recognize the prior and informed consent of women with severe disabilities in case of abortions, right? So it says that you can undertake an abortion procedure without seeking the woman's consent, and they problematize that and ask that it be repealed. And the second is several state governments have schemes whereby they prompt those schemes try to prompt people able-bodied people to marry those with disabilities, and they give you financial incentives to engage in that. And the committee says that this is absolutely unacceptable, and you can't, because it sends a very indignifying message about the capabilities of the disabled to be effective spouses. And the final thing I will point out is they talk about this issue of data, which the previous speaker spoke about how there isn't that person spoke about it in the context of employment, but actually the National Crime Records Bureau doesn't maintain any disaggregated data on the basis of disability to be able to assess how many disabled people were involved in any crimes that took place, especially sexual violence from both outsiders and family members and intimate partners. And they talk about how the NCRB really needs to ensure that it maintains disaggregated data. And this is something they say has to be done on an expedited basis. And the other thing is to update all laws to bring them in line with the RPWD Act and the convention. So even though we have the act now, we have the convention, there are still several laws at the central and state level that don't recognize all the things that these laws do. So they say that we need to fix that. So that's really it as far as I am concerned. This is, and of course, the concluding observations are available on their website, on the UN Library's website for all to see. So I'd strongly suggest that you have a look at them and work on making sure that they're meaningfully implemented to the extent we can. With that, I am done, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I request the participants, if there are any questions for Sir, they can now open. They can now ask their questions.
The chat box, if you could check that.
Okay, sir. I don't see any questions as of now, sir.
Just give 30 seconds, Anuja. If there is no questions, then we can go for another speaker.
No, we have already the questions listed over there in the chat box, earlier questions.
This question by Rudrashish Mondal, sir?
Yes.
Okay, sir. So Rahul, sir, there's this question put up by Rudrashish Mondal.
Right.
That is, what are the committees at different levels?
That I've answered. Is it just
That
on pen or
is
paper?
yeah.
That I've answered. But
Yes,
there was
sir.
another comment also after that.
Yes, sir. That's all for the questions in the chat box, sir.
Sir, Rahul,
Yeah,
sir,
this one at the beginning he says this one.
Yes. Just go ahead, Rahul, sir.
No, he's saying at the beginning. Okay, no, so this I have clarified. So this Rudrashi Mondal is just clarifying the rationale for their question. So that's fine. I've addressed that. Then Sumit Garg says it's interesting. Thank you. Then okay, that's it. There are no other comments.
Yeah, Rahul, from my side, Rahul.
Yes.
Actually, if you look at it, how far India is lag behind, or you can say that ahead of UNCRPD. What's your take on it? Is it simply you can say that complied, or what is your take? How you evaluate?
In some ways, we are ahead of, as in some ways we have done what the convention requires, and in some ways we have not. So I mean, first of all, I think it bears noting that we did ratify the convention and enacted the 2016 Act, which can't be said for many other nations, which still continue to have pre-UNCRPD laws. For instance, the Americans with Disabilities Act is 1990. The Equality Act in the UK is of 2010, and it also doesn't have all the beneficial provisions of the convention, as best I know. So the fact that we have that law is in itself a positive step. I mean, it does like as I indicated in my comments, the committee does recognize that several things that we pick up on from the convention, from non-discrimination to reasonable accommodation, accessibility, free education. These are all beneficial. These are all positive facets of the regime that we have now. Equally, for instance, one area where people have criticized Indian law is limited guardianship, where we don't recognize under Section 14
that agency.
precisely. So we have a supportive decision-making process for people with deaf blindness or significant intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, and that's something that people have problematized. 92F, as I said, is another one where you don't recognize the right of the woman before aborting her fetus. So it's a mixed picture. One, two. Sorry, I was just reading the comment that came in. So
there is one question. You can go ahead, Uncrpd.
Yes. So one, I think it's a mixed picture. Two, there's still scope to do more within the current law also to bring it in compliance with the Crpd itself. One important example here is the standard setting process, right? So under section 40, it requires the government to frame standards on physical accessibility, transport and ICT. And that had to be done long ago, but till now no standards other than like notifying those 3 standards under Rule 15, which were pre-existing standards, has been done. But now they've taken it up seriously. I'm saying this on the basis of the conversations I've had with the government. And for instance, the Bureau of Indian Standards released these ICT standards recently. The civil aviation standards, as I said, television broadcasting. Now, Home Ministry has come out with standards.
Police stations.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of work is happening now, and hopefully, and we have to really push for all of these standards to be as robust as they can. A, and then B, for them to be notified under the RPWD rules so that they actually become legal, which I'm sure they will, but they can't just remain on their own. They have to be notified through Rule 15 so that they get transformed into legally enforceable rights for those of us who are disabled. So yeah, that's my long answer.
Okay. Thank you. Anuja, there is one question. Just read the question to Rahul.
Yes, sir. So, Sir Rudrashish Mandal again asks that are those committees at village level are functional or still they need to be worked upon?
I'm not sure which committees, Rudrashish, you are talking about. Can you explain what committees you have in mind here?
Jayant, could you unmute him?
Mr. Marisport, he's allowed to unmute. He can unmute himself.
Okay. Then please unmute yourself, Rudraj.
Yes, he's asking if he can speak.
Yes.
Please do. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Actually, to do the groundwork, we need lower and lower level committees, sir. So we should have a village level committee or GP level committee or block level committees to work on disability sector. Okay, sir. So there are many committees in different sector like education or you say to speak. Many committees are there, but those are not functional at ground level. That was my question, sir. Is there any committee at the lower level? I mean, village GP or block level, and are those functional? Or still the committees are in pen and paper, just like other committees, and we need to work on that. Right. Sir, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what committees these are and whether they are pursuant to the RPWD Act. I don't think that Act requires the setting up of block level committees. The mechanism that it thinks of are at the district level, like the nodal district education officer, special courts, things like that. So I'm not sure what is the enabling power pursuant to which these committees have been set up. But certainly, if they are not functioning as they should, it's something that needs to be needs to be taken up at that level with every committee that we feel isn't functioning. and also something that we need to take up to the courts, and make sure that the courts get the government to submit a report in terms of what it is doing to get those committees to work. So if you reach out to me personally on a one-on-one basis, we can take this up in a meaningful way forward. And I will just indicate my email address verbally and in the chat box for anyone who's interested in getting involved in this or the accessibility work I'm doing or anything else really that pertains to disability rights advocacy. So let me just drop my email here. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, Rahul. Yes. Last question, Anuja, for Rahul.
yes, sir. This is the last question. This is put up by Mukesh Kumar,
Right.
who is a research scholar, HP University. He says
Right.
that is it legally right to use words like Divyang, specially abled, or differently abled persons instead of just disabled? Because he feels that being a disabled, he prefers to call himself disabled person. So please give your
Yeah.
views upon it.
I do too. And I think these words are problematic. I don't agree with it. I think it's a euphemistic way to refer to a person with a disability. It sort of indicates some amount of discomfort with a person's disability as something that you need to gloss over and portray in a more positive light just for the sake of it. So I personally disagree. But anyway, your question was not about my personal view. It was about the legal correctness. So I mean, it's of course open to the government to reference the disabled how they choose in their documents, but that referencing has to be consistent with the RPWD Act and the rights and principles that it is founded upon. It can definitely be argued that uh, the use of this term is not consistent with those principles, for such as the recognition of individual dignity, the fact that people with disabilities have to be recognized as um, being full and complete human beings, members of society who can't be alienated. And if you read the language of our discourse segment in the Vikash Kumar v UPSC judgment, that really picks up on this, as I said earlier, and has some important observations for the government to consider. So hopefully, somebody will use them effectively to go to a court and say, and of course, first go to the government, but that won't yield any results because the government itself is using this terminology. And they feel that, yeah, intellectually you may disagree with it, but practically it has a positive effect because it's at least better than calling the disabled Viklang and handicapped. But I say, why does it have to be one or the other? Just disabled as it is. Uh, why not just that? But anyway, so I guess you could take it up with the government to the extent that that is possible, which I don't really think it is, but you could also challenge it in the court. And this Madras High Court matter, I think, went to the Supreme Court, has gone now, and SLP was filed. So let us see what happens there. All right, anything else? Anyone else?
I think not.
Okay,
Anuja,
wonderful.
are you there?
Anuja,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes. Now it's
please
over.
yeah,
Conclude.
please. Thank you so much, Rahul ji.
Okay, thank you. It was great being here.
Yes.
And I'll pop in from time to time to attend
Yeah,
the rest of
definitely,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
And thank you, Rahul, for your wonderful speech and especially based on experience. Thank you, Rahul.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Bye bye. Take care. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, Anuja, over to you.
Okay, sir. That was
Yes, sir.
wonderful. Okay, sir, that was wonderful input to the today's topic. And now we'll move on to the next speaker, Santhya Lemar. Santhya Lemar is a PhD and an associate professor in Center of Disability Studies and Action and a School of Social Work at Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. She will be Fulbright Research Fellow in the UV Center for Disability Studies for the academic year 2012 and 13. Dr. Lemai's professional fields of interest include women with disabilities, youth having parents with disabilities, community education intervention with people with disabilities and their families, disability rehabilitation research. We are very grateful to have Dr. Lemai with us today, and now I'll hand over to Dr. Lemai to continue further.
Thank you very much. And good morning to everybody. And special thank to Bhumika Trut to invite me for the talk. And now I realize that we are talking about my biodata, but there are so many things you are not aware about me. So it's okay. Because basically I am an Erasmus Mundus fellow, Fulbright fellow, and a Rockefeller fellow. And then I'm also US, India US coordinator for inclusive education. And I also visited the United Nations for the CRPD and Human with Disability. So that was just brief information. I was asked to talk on the CRPD and women with disability because we have a six members in the panel, and everybody will talk about the CRPD. So I decided to focus on women with disability. Basically, when United Nations Convention on the Right of the People with Disability came into 2007, and that it was expected India time on this convention, and it is expected or it was expected to implement as per CRPD after 10 years over, and then it was decided that India and NGOs in India will present the alternate report on the status of the people with disability. And therefore, from 2017, all NGOs came together. They formed National Coalition of the People with Disability, and they started to work on the different articles led by CRPD. It was found that no one or no single NGOs want to focus on women with disability, and therefore Women with Disability India Network came together. They decided to focus on the women with disability issues and issue faced by women with disability in India. So from 2017, we Women with Disability India Network members came together, because if you look at the CRPD Article 6 on women with disability, the two major issues they mentioned, that two major point they mentioned, that third party recognize that women with disabilities and girls with disability face multiple discrimination, directly or indirectly. It can be different form of the discrimination, violence, abuse, exploitation, exclusion. These are a different form of the discrimination. And third party mention to ensure, to make sure that full and equal enjoyment of the human right for women with disability. Second one, they talked about that. To make sure to take appropriate measure or action for women with disability and girl with disability, so that they can enjoy their human right in the full capacity. It was found that Women with Disability India Network, different members did a lot of survey on the women with disability in India across the country, this one, and based on their survey, it was found that there are many issues where found that one is there, that there is the negative attitude towards women with disability. Women with disability and girls with disability are experiencing various forms of discrimination, direct, indirect, violence, human rights exploitation, violation of the human right, abuse, exclusion this one. It was also found that inadequate policies and programs are not addressing the specific barrier faced by women with disability, or women with disabilities are not included in the part of the policy and program or budget allocation, specific budget allocation for women with disability, or there is no funding for the program for women with disability. So it was found so many issues there. It is also found that there is poor quality of education. Per capita amount regular school, inclusive school, patient school. The quality of the education is poor, and that affects the work opportunity. And it is said that we have, as per census 2011, we say that there is 11.8 million women with disability in India. However, we are not getting accurate data based on the age, state, type of the disability. Whatever they praise it. However, there are many women with disability who are not included in the data. Possible that family may not know that they have a disability, or family may not want to tell that they have a disability. Whatever the social taboo, fear of the social exclusion. So it is the incomplete data. It is not accurate data. That one there. And when you talk about the violence against women with disability, it is also found that we don't have data on the gender-based violence. And like Mr. Rahul Bajaj talks about the National Bureau on the Crime Report, that women with disabilities, crime against women with disabilities are not registered in there. And this is a fact that they are not registered, and therefore they are deprived to get the facility, denied to get justice, access to justice. They are also denied to get the legal capacity, denial of the reasonable accommodation. It is because of the triple disadvantage. Be a woman, be a disabled. And if they are belong to the rural area or lower caste or lower class, so it becomes the triple disadvantage of being woman with disability. And therefore, a lot of inclusion are there, and it was found that they submitted the report at India and that 2014, and they urged that women with disability, the action must be taken against violence against the woman with disability. There is no action taken to protect the women with disabilities and their right from that violence. And therefore, TIDA emphasized to take action, to do the measure, to take the action measure to protect women with disability for this world. And that, so that was there. So based on initial India report and TIDA's report, and whatever the report available, reliable report, maybe based on the government of India, World Bank, UNICEF, whatever. We collected the data. We found and we used the Article 6, women with disability, and under Article 6, we cover all articles that made by the CRPD, like a protection, violation, education work, and we focus more on the 5 to 7 areas: education, health, livelihood, independent living, and legal capacity, violence, this one. And that what are the funding available, accessibility, we cover all these areas, because it was found that those NGOs or government submit the report, they talk about the general people with disability. They are not focusing on the woman with disability or elderly with disability or children with disability or intersex of the childhood. And therefore, it is a fair need that we must have separate information or alternate report on certain population. And therefore, Women with Disability India Network decided to prepare the alternate report on women with disability, status of women with disability in India, and how CRPD implemented and what was the current progress and status, and what government effort to protect women with disability. And that was we prepared the report. 2 years it took, and we prepared this report. Because when you talk about the disability rights and advocacy, this is the important. Now I am not expert in the law. There are many people in that panel are expert in the law. I am not expert. However, I'm not saying that I'm a disability right or activity. I'm a simple faculty. But what I can do for them at the advocacy, I am a part of that advocacy process. So when you talk about the advocacy, there are various ways of the advocacy, especially at the higher level. There is a policy advocacy, or there is a right submission and lobby to the government to talk on the status of people with disability, status of women with disability, or status of children with disability. And we can also make the member of the parliament to push this issue in the legislation. I'm not expert, all of you know very well, but this is the way of the advocacy, this one. And that another part is that we are using the campaign, media, social media at the advocacy, this one. Or we are mobilizing different NGOs in the country and that to bring them together and work on that and at the advocacy, this one. Here what happened, if you look at the country, we have a many NGOs. I don't know, I'm not a right person to make comment, but it was found that north in part, Kashmir or some part of the West or South, they are not effective lobby. They have NGOs, but they work on the community-based rehabilitation or the overall rehabilitation of the people with disability. I'm not talking about medical model or social model, but each one tried to reach disabled population, but very few NGOs were in the rural area. And therefore, it was found that rural women with disabilities are not aware of their own right. They don't know what is the meaning of the CRPD. They don't know what is the meaning of the RPWD Act. They don't know that they can enjoy their own right. And that was the typical patriarchal thing, that attitude of the village toward the woman with disability that suppress them to do this one. So it was found that when you start to work on that issue or on that paper, it is realized that there are so many issues come up, and therefore it was strongly found that we should prepare the alternate report on women with disability. So we collect all the data. We had meeting with the different NGOs. We were a part of the national coalition. We try to understand what are the issues, feedback, measure taken by the government, measure taken by the people with disabilities organization, measure taken by NGO. So we try to understand and collect the information from this one. And it was found that there are very few women with disability organizations who participate in the national coalition. So we came together, we work with contact with the different women with disability organizations. There is a lack of funding, they may not know what exactly should be done. So in spite of the difficulty, we collect more information, we develop the contact with them. And after 2 years of the effort, we prepare the alternate report on the status of the woman with disability in India, this one. And if you please go to the United Nations website, you will get clear report of the on the woman with disability, this one. Because we use all the articles for women with disability. And you will get clear picture how women with disabilities are deprived of this one. And therefore, however, the United Nations, they gave the date, and that date, they also asked the question, how come that you wanted a separate president? Therefore, the advocacy started. We explain the importance to understand the issue specific barrier faced by women with disability, and therefore it is a need to have a separate meeting to submit the report on the woman with disability. And then we also explain that when ensure natural coalition for the right of the people with disability, when they present, they will present at the common one. It is not a specific provision. Finally, United Nations Committee agreed to give the date to it. So it is a part of the advocacy, continuous later explaining this one, conveying them. It is also part of the international advocacy, this one. Finally, they agreed to give the date, and we got the date at I think maybe 10 to 13 April 2019. The Women with Disability India Network member visited to United Nations. This one, we and private briefing, we presented our report. They recognize the values of that report, and that they have too many questions. For example, of the how many sign language interpretation in India, what about the forced marriage, what about the forced sterilization, what about the legal capacity, what about the accessibility issue, this one, and what about that, what to that one more I forgot, I'm sorry because of the way I'm talking to this one. And what about education and employment is there, but and the right to family. And so many questions the committee asked toward, and we are able to explain it. However, there are certain areas we could not answer this, but there are so many things we don't know much about this, whatever effort is there. And after presentation, the committee then lead of the issue that this is issue. We need further clarification. And we got the lead of issue in month of June or May. Again, we were on that list of issue. Again, we got the data. Again, we contacted the different stakeholder, and then we again submitted the another alternate report based on the list of issue. And the committee read all these one. Again, in September, we were asked to present in the private briefing, and they got satisfactory answer. They were very happy that we took so much effort to present the status of the woman with disability. So it is the kind of the advocacy on behalf of the woman with disability. And then they asked so many questions. We again explained it. And on that, on the next day, the government of India presented their report on what they have done for the people with disability in India. Many of the action were taken by the government of India. It is really good. I really appreciated government effort, but it is not enough. Sometimes it is at a superficial level. It is not in depth. So a lot of work should be done. And therefore, committee asked so many questions to government of India based on the national plan plus Women with Disability India Network report, and it was found that many government of India representatives could not answer some of these questions. But this was the good decision. And the committee asked to work on women with disability in India, and within the 2 years come back at the report this one. And as a result of that Crpd presentation, we got fund from the Disability Rights Fund, New York. We started to develop the manual toolkit for the right of the woman with disability. And we divided different zones. I went to Karnataka South. This one, I took 2 training, especially rural disabled population, rural women with disability. And it was found that they don't know what is the meaning of the Crpd, what is the meaning of the right. They are concerned about the 2-time food and livelihood issue, and corona damage their livelihood opportunity. It affects their lot of health, and many of them did not know what is the meaning of the corona, and that they did not, and they also got health complicated. It was also found that they have a lot of sexual reproductive health issue, and they don't know what is the meaning of the period, what is the why period occur, why menopause occur, how to maintain a menstrual health hygiene, and why we need to remove the uterus. So many questions come up, and we try to explain everything, and it was found that government, what we say that NRLM or Narega, whatever, set up by the government, they do not play an active role in this issue. So there is a lack of healthcare facility, lack of education, and lack of employment issue. So when you talk about that advocacy, this one, so we are able to do advocacy at a national level and at international level. But when we came back after successful advocacy, when we came back, we decided to work at the local level. We found so many difficulties, very challenging job for us. That language problem was for me because I come from Mumbai. I don't know Kannada and Telugu. However, I learned some of these words to keep to what is that to establish the rapport between the woman with disability in the rural area, motivated them to speak. And you know, the best part that what woman with disability told me, Madam, you are the first one to ask me what we said. Nobody asked before that. That was the one. So they are open here. Second one, they say that we did not know that we have PD, we have our own voice. That is the advantage of that advocacy network. And third one, they say that, oh, that we, but we are not used to think, because our man or elderly people say that we are not supposed to think or talk. So it was difficult for them to open up. So on the first day they kept quiet. We have to push them by giving group activity this one. And on the second day they become the bold. They say, no madam, we wanted to share a lot of things. Please allow her to talk. And full 2 days they were talking, sharing the idea. They wanted to know more about right. However, what Mr. Rahul Bajaj said that government mechanism is also difficult to allow her to implement the program, and that is the major issue is there one. And we also mentioned that how to at the Kram Panchayat level, and we did the Kram Panchayat level, you can reach at the what is the district level and then state level. So that I get the idea about this is what I help them to connect it from the Chikbalapur, Bangalore to Gulbarga to the northeast of Karnataka. So I help them to connect them with each other, help them to form a group for the advocacy this world. It is a just beginning, but we have to do a lot of work to do on this one. And therefore, I feel that CRPD presentation at the CRPD committee, presentation before the CRPD committee really helped me to understand the legal perspective, to understand the status of the woman with disability, and I got golden opportunity to go back and work with them. And then I also realized how difficult for me to work with them, to push with them, to motivate with them, and to empower them. Basically, I'm a faculty, I'm an academician. However, I prefer to work with people with disability, especially women with disability and children with disability. Because for children with disability, I prefer to work on inclusive education. For women with disability, I prefer to work on the right of the woman with disability. However, there are many more hurdles. We have to go ahead. But I think when we talk about this one, it is important for all of us to pay attention. Please do something for the right of the people with disability, especially elderly with disability, women with disability, and children with disability. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for those very insightful thoughts filled with experiences.
Someone raising the hand.
Shampa Bhul and Rudrashish Mandal. Sir, if should I ask them if they have questions or something?
Please ask. Okay, maybe.
Yes, I request Shampa Bull and Rudrashish Mondal to please go forward, or what is the reason they're raising their hands?
Shall I ask my question or the
Yeah,
other question?
please
Okay.
continue.
Okay. Thank you. So my question to ma'am is, she was talking about the acts, rules, etc., and rights for the women with disability. My particular question is, what are the measures which can be taken to make the awareness? Like we have seen in not only in rural areas but also in urban areas, we are kind of facing the lack of awareness. We perhaps not only the persons with the women with disability, but also the persons with whom we are working with, the institution we are involved in, so they are not also aware about these kind of rules and rights. So what are the measures that can be taken? To certain extent, this is the responsibility, I mean, the activists, they can take the responsibility. And also we can see, we can see that kind of, sorry. So the provisions, um, the the question, sorry, actually here is the noise. Now
Unmute someone, unmute. Okay. I'm
Okay, so my particular question is there any provision from government side to spread this kind of awareness in grassroots levels? So apart from campaigns, making campaigns or workshops, etc., are there some different measures that can be taken, or what are the provisions from government side to create this kind of awareness?
Okay, can I answer?
Yes, repeat please, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Okay, thanks, Champa, to ask the question, very rational question. See, when we are working for the vulnerable population, especially women with disability, you have to find out your own way. What are the strategies you are going to adopt? You have to decide it, because what I adopted may not be effective for you. So if you decided to work at institution level or at rural area or at urban area, first one, that collect the information from them, find out what are their needs, find out what resources available, find out what are the government mechanisms are doing, and what they have done in the past, what are the success, what are the failure, find out these one. Based on the information, you can plan what next. For example, of this one, if you say that I work in the institution, woman with disability at the institution, the quality of the life is very bad, because I have seen so many times. Quality is very bad. No facility, no legal capacity, no health care services. So you are collecting the information from them, and then you have to talk to the institutional aid, what they are doing, what they have done. If it belongs to government, then they will not respond you. If it is the private, then they have to respond to you. And then you can contact the government official. If they refuse to answer, then there are other ways. You can take the consultation of the lawyer. We have a lot of lawyers who are in the field of disability. You can take consultation with the lawyer, or you can take the right to information. Under the right to information, you can ask the government what are the current status of the woman with disability in the institution. So I'm giving an example of this one. And if they did not respond to it, you can use the social media to make them aware about that. What is the current status of this one? You can give the newspaper information. You can invite the panel discussion on this. You can also invite a government official to discuss on that issue. There are so many. See, once you start, you will get more and more idea. And second one, when you work with the people, different stakeholder will give you the different idea, different strategy, and you can pick up this one. Because if I say it may be useful, may not be useful, so you have to find out this one. So same also in urban area, because I have a project in the Mumbai slum area. I have my own project, field action project for the people with disability in Mumbai slum area, because nobody work in the slum area disabled population. And therefore I started my project, and it is a near TI this one. Second largest slum area in Asia. First one is Dharavi and second one is M-word. And I work on the M-word. And I realized that it is not enough for me to work the entire. So we divided the work in Pratham organization and ICBR. So Pratham organization and another organization were in one part of the slum area and I were in another part of the slum area. And we come together to discuss this one. So we developed the content with the different government department for this one. We made a group of the people with disability, women with disability, and parent having children with disability. And we take the meeting and we encourage them to form a therapy. Now, because of the corona, it stopped now. Hope next year I will start this back. But they developed the WhatsApp group to fight with the corona and to get the government facility for this. Please remember, government can do what they want to do or what they can do. We remember that we should not depend on the government entirely. We must force the government officially to utilize the scheme and facility. They will give you trouble. This document is required, this one is required, that one is required. We have to follow this one. It is a painful, it is a time consuming, but we have to do this. And at the same time, we can contact the Rotary Club Lion. That was I would do this one. I contacted different individual donor Rotary Club this one and ask them to get help this one. I also find out the list of the health scheme like Rajiv Gandhi Jivan Dai Yojana, Mahatma Phule Yojana. I'm talking about in Mumbai this one. Lot of scheme we have for the health. I use this scheme for the woman with disability. They mention only health issue, they did not say only for women with disability. They for the people. So I use this scheme for the people. So please try to understand. Don't focus on the disability law scheme policy. Focus on the general scheme policy program for our vulnerable group. I hope I answer. I hope Champa, I'm able to explain you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Sir, there is one more question from this person, Rudashish Mandal. So can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you, sir. So actually, ma'am, my question was almost similar as Sampa asked. But the thing is, as mom is working as a faculty in some university, no, so university is a kind of human resource. Okay, there are many students, and we have a lot of human resource there. So need to do more and more research at a grassroots level. You think you just now, because why I'm saying this is for to do anything, you need a good database, and it is a lack of database in many ways. Even you go to the government site or anywhere, you will not find a perfect database. So you will find different database differs from one side to another side. So see, actually, what Sampa said that we have to go to the grassroots level, because there is lack of awareness in many level, ma'am. Policies, there are many policies, there are many acts, there are. You say we are discussing about the violence with women. You see, ma'am, with a girl child, POXO is there at its place. And the punishments are also there. Even if somebody knows something happened and he hides it, then also there is punishment for him, for their schoolmaster or anybody. And perpetrators are there inside the family and also in known portion. So even if everything is there, but there is lack of awareness, ma'am. So what strategy are you doing? Are you adapting to the more campaign at awareness at grassroots level, at the same time at what I say the upper level, at government level, lobby at government level, and all those. So thank you, ma'am.
Okay. What I informed Champa, I'm continuing further this one. when you talk about the rural area, because I have a lot of rural practicum in different part of the country, and I took my student to there. You are right, there is a lack of accurate data, but it should not prevent us to work with them. It should not. We should connect. We should be after the government official, but we will also continue our own work. One is there. We work on the community education. Community education is very important. Community education is like that about the sensitization of the disability. What is the meaning of the disability? And I don't give lecture. I gave activities. For example, I did a lot of work. Asha worker, Angadwadi health worker, government official, school going children, teacher, village panchayat. We have activities. For example, you can close your eye and walk. How do you feel about that? Discuss with them. Or I will put the volume low and try to hear. You cannot hear. How do you feel to become a deaf? Or you can tie your hand and write the paper painting, but your both hands are tied and you cannot write. How do you feel? So we gave the different experiential activity. Like I think yesterday Dr. Madhura Nak Chaudhary might have mentioned challenge this one. This is the part of this one. So we gave the awareness program at a different stakeholder in the village. And then we have to continue for 1 year because it takes the time to remove the bias or reduce the bias, this one. And therefore, we have to continue this one. Besides, we visited to the Gram Panchayat office or any office. We asked how many people with disability or women with disability are in the village. They may not have data. What do they have data? They give. It's okay. You ask any member in the family, appeal them, inform us. They come, they inform you because they need help. So that was the big thing. The one is that the village must know why you are here. They must develop trust on you. And you can take the help of some local NGO to start. NGO may not be working in the field of recruitment. It's okay. Train them. I always do this one. There are NGOs working on the education, empowerment of the youth. I also give training to NGOs to work in the field of disability. You can also do this one. And I think it is a big one. Maybe Ruksha Mondar and Champa, I would be happy to give my email ID and a phone. You can contact me anytime. And that is good because it is the continuous debate and discussion a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I think Anchor, please.
Yes, sir. First of all, I would request all the participants, if any of them have any questions regarding the speaker or Miss Sandhya ma'am, Dr. Sandhya ma'am, please type your questions in the chat box and please mention to which speaker you are specifically asking the questions. We'll take those questions at the end of the session. Now I would like to call upon Miss Neha Aneja ma'am. She is an assistant professor of law at Campus Law Center, Delhi University, having done her BLLB from Maharshi Dayanand University, Rohtak, and LLM from Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra, with specialization in corporate law and family law. She is pursuing her PhD on the topic Legal Protection of Persons with Physical Disabilities, National and International Perspectives from University of Delhi. She has attended many national and international seminars and conferences. Her areas of interest include disability laws, family laws, law of contract, and property law. Ma'am, I request you to please take over the session and give us your views on the issue.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and a very warm good afternoon to all of you. Today's my topic for which I have been asked, that is United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in short, which is to be called as UNCRPD. The very first thing, I want to congratulate everyone for tomorrow's coming World Disability Days. And with that, let's start to our, topic with our topic. And the very first, thing with which I want to start a quote: "No one is disabled, one is made disabled." So basically, this is quoted by Ina Rosing in his book. And what exactly it means that I want to take up one illustration for same. Thereafter, I think so that I'll justify this quote and I'll be able to explain this quote. Let's assume there is a wheelchair user and he is in your institution, whether it is educational institution or it is your office place, and you do have a staircase there in your office or in your college or in your university faculty, and there is no lift, no ramp. Answer me, who is, if he is having class at first floor, second floor, or his concerned office is at first floor, second floor, then actually who is responsible, who is disabled? Not the person with disability, not the person who is a wheelchair user. Actually, this is a society which is making him disabled, because instead of having the staircase, if we will provide him proper accessibility, if we will provide him proper inclusion, and if we will install their lift, if it is not possible to install the lift there, then at least you can construct a ramp there, and by using that lift, by using that ramp, everybody can go upstairs, whether it is so-called able body or disabled body. So always remember, every person with disability may prove or can prove himself or herself, and actually I would say there is no need to prove. Every disabled person with disability is a useful asset if society allows him to him for that, by providing accessibility, by providing inclusion. With this, I want to focus on the data right now, because everybody was talking about data, and we have already learned with the speech of earlier speakers that how much data is relevant for any policy framing, for any law framing, or for the protection of their rights. So first of all, we need to identify. So I want to tell you, more than 1 billion people around the world have some or other kind of the disability, which is actually forming the 15% of the world population. And I want to tell you, however, they are 15%, and we can categorize them as the world's largest minority. But let me tell you, according to the WHO, World Health Organization, this figure is increasing day by day. And because of what? Population growth, because of medical advances, because earlier when we were not able to save someone, now with the medical advancement, at least we are able to save the life, but they people have to face in this way or that way certain kind of the disabilities at times. So aging process is another reason for the disability. And I want to tell you, out of these 15% of the world population, when we are saying more than 1 billion people are person with disability, so according to UNDP, United Nations Development Program, 80% of this percentage is living in the developing countries, and they are facing material deprivation and oppression because of their disability. And as it has been rightly pointed out by earlier speakers, that person with disabilities suffer, they experience inequality almost in every sphere of their life, whether it is healthcare, whether it is employment, whether it is education, whether it is political participation. And the moment you will study more about the life of the disability, it is actually they are getting discriminated in every way, whether it is even their personal life also, whether it is something about their right to family, whether it is something their right to get married, right to get children, reproductive rights. Almost in every sphere of the life, they have been excluded, or they have been exploited. So for example, right now I'm just giving example of one fact that is raised by the UNESCO, which is United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, that 90% of the children with disability in developing countries, they do not attend school due to disability. So please try to understand, they are not able to attend the school not because they don't want, because they are having certain kind of the disability. Is it because of that? No, there are a number of reasons for that. They are not able to attend the school because of inaccessible society, because of inaccessible educational institution, because of inaccessible transport facilities, because of attitudinal barrier of the society, how we used to treat them, what you will study, what you will do by study and all that. Actually, we used to treat generally, which was, however, there is a change. I do appreciate that. Now we are following the social model of the disability, but it was something which is still, which was still regulating everything, like pity model of the, disability, charity model of the disability. But we cannot deny this fact that anyhow, anywhere, still that model of disability or that kind of the approach is applicable in towards the person with disabilities. Now let us directly talk about the United Nations Convention, Uncrpd, and I just wanted to tell you that it was adopted by the United Nations or the UN General Assembly on 30th December 2006. It was the very first human rights treaty of 21st century, and it was along with one optional protocol. I want to tell you this United Nations Convention or international treaty, which was Human International Treaty, was 8th in number. So what I'm just trying to highlight that before UNCRPD, which is specifically a disability human rights oriented treaty, right? Even before that, there were number of human rights treaties, but the issue was what those human rights treaties, whether it is enforcing the civil, political rights or economic rights or in whatever way, these things were not actually giving proper treatment to the disabled people, person with disability, and to enforce their right. And because of that, we had a specific international treaty with us, or the convention for the justifying their rights, for upholding or enforcing the right of the person with disability. So just for your knowledge, I want to tell you, it came into enforcement on 3rd May 2008. Until today, 180 countries have ratified this this convention. Thereafter, the point which is here, that is UNCRPD, as I just told you, first legally enforceable instrument, right, which is specifically focusing on the rights of the person with disability, and its significance cannot be denied, and it is visible everywhere. And because of that, even after signing or ratifying the UNCRPD, there is a huge change in India, and landmarking, I would change here in India with 2016 enactment. However, there are own limitations of 2000 RPD Act 2016, but definitely we cannot deny the fact there is a change. And one of the things which needs to be celebrated by us, that the convention embraces a model of the social human rights. And why social human rights? And I just referred to you that in beginning we were not treating person with disability well, and they were just object of the pity, they were just object of the charity, and later on they were just became the object of the social welfare. And basically we later on there was another model by which we started to take them as a medical model, under the medical model. And what is the meaning of medical model? Means we were treating them as something like their disability, certain kind of disease which need to be treated. They do have certain kind of impairment which gets to be treated. If it is not, we need to give them certain kind of the special social treatment, welfare treatment and all. But slowly and gradually, the new development which has been which has been started or which has been adopted by convention, that is a social model. As in beginning I just told you, nobody is disabled actually. If we will provide them, if we will include them into our mainstream, if we will give them opportunity, if we will give them accessibility, if we will give them equal opportunity, then in that way they can also be a useful asset, and they can equally enjoy their life. So that is social approach that society needs to change. We need to change our attitude towards them. And another thing which I have written here also, human rights approach, because I just told you before UNCRPD there were we do have number of the human rights, specific human rights treaties with us, but anyhow all those human rights treaties were not able to enforce the rights of the disabled. And because of that, this UNCRPD has also taken up the human right approach, and basically it has laid down what that disability is what human right issue. It is not anymore something pity. It is not anymore something charitable issue. It is not something which is now medical issue. It is now something human right issue. It is now something which we need to settle down at the part of the society by transforming their attitude towards the disabled. Because what I feel that after UNCRPD at international level, after so many stringent laws with us here at national level, which are in line with the UNCRPD, specifically for example RPD Act, National Trust Act, Rehabilitation Act, Mental Disability Act, Mental Health Act, sorry. So all these acts are right now in line with UNCRPD. We do have a strong law with us, but even though why that law is not getting implemented, even though why that law is not bringing much transformation as expected, that is the main issue, right? And we will based upon that, today I have taken this topic UNCRPD specifically in context of the implementation and enforcement at the international level, because I have to confine myself to the international level. Somehow if I will get ever chance later on, I'll talk about the national level as well. So we just talk about that what is the UNCRPD. Just in order to give you idea more about it, I want to tell you that UNCRPD promotes and protects civil, social, economic, political, cultural, health, reproductive rights of the disabled, employment rights of the disabled. It guarantees what there will be fully equal enjoyment of all human rights which is otherwise available to all of us as a human being. I want to tell you one thing, that whether it was United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, always remember this is not something under UNCRPD we are providing them some new right to disable. No, even before that, from the beginning, with the inception of the United Nations, when they adopted United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, it has been written there that all people are born free and equal. So it is there from the beginning, but unfortunately we need to make the world realize that the disabled people are also human beings and they do also entitled for the equal human rights. And that is what for what we do have specifically this UNCRPD. So I am here going to discuss the substantive framework for application and enforcement of the person with disability, and I will not only talk about the UNCRPD. Actually, when I'm talking about implementation enforcement mechanism, it will be in connection to the domestic enforcement, that when a nation is going to sign or ratify the UNCRPD, how it can be enforced against that state party if they are not fulfilling or they are not complying with the obligations which have been laid down under your UNCRPD. So thereafter, I just want to further, give me 1 minute. So it is the very first thing with which we start, that there is a shift towards social or human rights approach. I won't talk much about it because already I have covered this. And however, basically, I have already told you the medical-based notion, that what is the medical school, what is the social school of the disability. I want to tell you, before UNCRPD, if we talk about specific, the soft laws which were available at international level, which were actually two, that was Declaration on the Rights of Mentally Retarded Person 1971 and Declaration on the Rights of Disabled Person 1975. That was two based upon medical model. On that point, I want to, however, that is not directly to be dealt by me because I'm trying to confine myself to be UNCRPD only. But I want to tell you, when we have ratified this UNCRPD in India, by India, then we changed our law. We repealed earlier Person with Disability Act 1955, which was totally based upon the medical model of the disability. And how it was based upon medical model of disability, that we were considering that if somebody is having 40% of the disability, then he will be the disabled, right? And he will be entitled for certain benefits like reservation and all. And actually somebody is disabled or somebody is not disabled. How to analyze that? That is to be analyzed by one particular authority, for example concerned authority, for example the CMO and all. So what changes here in RPD Act, why I'm saying that UNCRPD, which is based upon human right and social model, and we have adopted RPD Act in line with that. I want to tell you, on certain aspect, we are in line with UNCRPD. right? We have given the definition for the person with disability right now in RPD Act in line with UNCRPD criteria. But how far the benefits, certain benefits are concerned, for that we have classified the disabled people into benchmark disability. And what is the benchmark disability means? Whosoever is having 40% of disability. Unfortunately, anyhow, directly, indirectly, we are carrying forward with us the medical model as well. But we should be happy that in substance, right now, RPD Act is based upon the social and human right approach, right? And I want to tell you one thing, that if somebody is having, just answer me, if somebody is having right now 10% disability, 6% disability, as it was a number of examples with help of the decided cases given by my speakers earlier speakers, I want to tell you, somebody is having 6% disability. Now under your RPD Act, it means they are disabled, they are still disabled. Percentage is immaterial. And when I'm saying they are disabled, means they do have equal right to get protected against any kind of the discrimination. If there is violence against that, if there is exploitation of them, if there is any kind of, ill treatment to them, they can get protected under your RPD Act. 40% condition is only for seeking certain kind of the specific reserve benefit for the benchmark disability, who will be the person or who is having disability 40% or more than 40%. So right now the definition or the approach of disability has been changed, and here I want to draw your attention for the definition of disability given under your UNCRPD. So article 1 of UNCRPD define the disability as what? Condition arising from. Now you need to focus on that. Disability is now what? A condition arising from interaction with various barriers that may hinder their full and effective participation in society on equal basis with other. So here disability is not something which is any medical condition. If somebody is not able to fully participate into the society because of various possible barriers. For example, I just gave you example of accessibility. For example, I talk about the inclusion, that there is lack of inclusion. So all these barriers are actually which is in interaction with the other conditions and making any person incapable to participate in the society will be the disability. And I want to tell you, person with disability who is having certain kind of the condition, who is facing that kind of condition. Here number of speakers were also talking about, and there were questions by attendees also, that what is the right terminology for the person with disability. First of all, I want to tell you, I myself is also a woman with disability, and the point which terminology is fine or okay according to me or according to the law. I want to tell you one big change under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Person with Disability was what? Earlier we were using the term disabled people, and even WHO was using the term handicap, impairment, all these things were in use, right? Now with this change, what is the change? We have used this terminology person with disability, and I really want to make you aware to all of you. See, person with disability means what? The objective of UN is to make you learn and to remember everybody is first of all a person. Everybody is first of all a human being. And later on disability or not disability is a secondary thing. We should treat them with dignity. We should treat them with respect, because he or she, whosoever is a person with disability, is a human being first and foremost, and disability is the second thing. That is the reason throughout your UNCRPD, the term person with disability has been used. Another thing which is here, even in your RPD Act, same terminology has been adopted. However, the Indian terminology which is nowadays in trend, which has been started by government, Divyangjan is concerned, personally speaking, I do not agree with that. Right? For example, that under law, we are, as a person with disability, we are claiming the equal rights. We are not claiming special treatment. Remember that. We want to have equal treatment. We do not want to have special treatment. It is very, in my personal opinion, it is very wrong to call even someone a person with a different able student or different able people with special abilities. No, we are just like you. right? We are not something, divine. We are just like you, and we like to get treated equally just like you. So this is the reason, as per me, as per law, the right terminology is what person with disability, in line with the international human instruments. So thereafter, I will skip directly to the certain substantive rights, which I want to make you aware about, that under UNCRPD specifically, certain rights were, upheld. I will not go into detail because I really want to make aware about you the implementation enforcement mechanism at international level. That's what I'll just make you aware, that right to equality and non-discrimination, right to barrier-free environment, right to life, protection in situation of risk, equal recognition before law, equal access to justice, liberty, security of person, freedom from torture or from cruel or degrading treatment or punishment, right? And another thing is freedom from exploitation, violence, and abuse. Another, right to integrity, empowerment, nationality, right to live in community independently, right to expression, opinion, right to privacy, right to home and family, right to education, right to health, right to habilitation, right to work and employment, adequate standard of living and social protection, right to participation in political and public life, right to participate in cultural and recreation leisure. So rather than going separately one to two, just in order to create the continuity, I just want to discuss certain rights with help of certain illustrations. And what are those rights? For example, I just told you, everybody is born free, everybody is having equal right, everybody is having right not to be discriminated. And when I'm saying everybody is having right to accessibility, it means right to barrier free environment. Right to life include right to life with dignity, right? If I'm a person with disability, then I do have a right to get all basic needs. Because of that, I can live the life with the basic standard in a dignified way. For example, if there are not accessible toilets, not accessible transportation, not accessible institutions, schools, colleges, or any public institution, then it is what it is, violation of my right. So even a person with next is protection in situation of risk, even a person with disability is a valuable person. So at the time of the any kind of the mishappenings, for example, there is some natural calamities, there is a earthquake, then they do also have a right to get safe first. That does not mean that if there is a disabled and able, first of all save able and later on disabled should be the secondary. No, they are equal recognition before the law. They do also have a right to equal access to the justice, liberty, security, and also they do have a right to get free, protected from torture. And specifically, as the Sandhya ma'am rightly pointed out, there are special provision for the protection of the women with disability from abuse, violence. But that is not only for the women, that is for all people who are person with disability, irrespective of the gender. However, one specific section has been devoted to the women with disability. Along with that, I want to tell you expression, opinion, right to mobility, right to privacy also. If I do have a certain kind of the disability, I do have a right to privacy. I'm not here to I'm not saying that you should not disclose the data for purpose of collection of data, but I do have a right of privacy also. Nobody should be allowed to, unless and until it is necessary to disclose. Otherwise, no person should be intentionally forcing me to explain or to expose my disability. Another thing, as I just told you, I want to tell you, however, it may not appear to you severe as much it is, but actually the person with disability face discrimination in their personal life also. When they are getting married, they get neglected, and even they get married, people misuse them, right? Most of the time people misuse them. So or moreover, number of the women with disability have been denied the right or reproductive right, where they won't be able to take care of the child, right, brought up of the child. So education, health, everybody is aware about that. So thereafter, but one more 2 points I want to talk about in context of the right. That is what everybody is having, every person with disability is having right to participate in political public life. But this is something to be think by us, that how many there in the parliament to represent as a person with disability? No, right? You should think about it. How many of us are allowed to get the ticket to contest? And moreover, they are, many of the person with disability are not able to cast their vote because of inaccessibility, because of the non-availability of the facilities for same. And another thing, cultural life. Again, this is something, it may appear to you like, okay, it is not severe, but always think about a right to enjoy the cultural life, recreation life, leisure, sports. This is also the basic right. For example, suppose you are going to a PVR, and have you ever noticed that how many PVRs are accessible? So don't you think so that if I'm a woman with disability, or if there is a person with disability, they never feel like to watch a movie? So they do also have that right. You cannot deprive them for same. So I'm coming directly to the point, implementation measures which are there given specifically from your article 31 to article 14 in your UNCRPD. I want to tell you that even the earlier
Pardon to
conventions.
interrupt you, ma'am, but
Yes.
due to paucity of time, it would be great if you can wrap up in few minutes.
Okay, no issues. So
Thank you, ma'am.
implementation is what specifically, so I'm moving towards directly to the implementation. Just give me 1 minute. Yes, statistic and data, UNCRPD for the implementation facilitation measures has obligated the state parties to collect and circulate the disability, and basically it is very uncommon in other human rights treaties, and this is something to be appreciated. So it outlines the mechanism to be used for the gathering, preserving and use of the information. Thereafter, the another thing which is here, international cooperation. So there is what provision for the international cooperation that recognize that that basically programs are inclusive. Every programs in every kind of the state party should be inclusive. One should be accessible to the person with disability. So this is again to be appreciated, that huge opportunity and need for, there is a huge opportunity and need for the cooperation, and that has been recognized by the UNCRPD. Thereafter, national implementation of the monitoring. So this is one of the very important thing, and it has been rightly pointed out by one of the eminent professor, Jack Donnelly, that the struggle for human rights will be won or lost at national level. Even if we do have any strong international instrument or convention at international level, and any state party here means any nation has ratified that convention, just by ratification there will be no solution, no achievement, right? So actually the actual struggle for the UN, for any kind of the enforcement of any human right convention will be at the national level, and for that there is a proper mechanism given in UNCRPD. And thereafter, the thing is what, for that there is a proper, under your article 33, due consideration has been given. Now I will directly talk about the committees. Right, one special committee on the rights of person with disability to monitor the implementation with help of the experts has been framed, and this is with it has been laid down that the committee will be getting the cooperation through the DPOs. Means DPOs here means the disabled persons organization. So one thing which is to be really appreciate, when the convention negotiations were started, the NGOs who are working, or the disabled persons organization who are working in that field since long, who are already aware about the issues or the matters related to the disabled. So their consultation was done, their opinion was taken up, and the point which is important, NGOs, DPOs, they have been involved in the enforcement mechanism also, because as it was rightly pointed out, the basic funda of United Nation Convention on the Rights of Person with Disability is what? That nothing without, there cannot be anything without me, means nothing, that is another thing. You cannot talk about me without including me. So committee composition will be in that way. How there will be the committee composition, I have talked in, so I'm in lack of the time. I'm just directly showing you the committee constitution. Just give me another 1 minute only. Yes, initially it was constituted of 12 experts, and later on it is of 18, and committee members are to be elected to 4-year term and eligible for one for re-election. So with this, I want to tell you about one another important thing about which what I believe that definitely there will be unawareness. Let me skip all these things and commit directly to the optional protocol. I want to tell you this UNCRPD has been, adopted with one optional protocol, and this optional protocol is providing another procedure for the implementation and the monitoring of the convention in order to strengthen it, right? And what is that? That if suppose I am a disabled person, I am facing any kind of the discrimination in my country, and my country is a state party to UNCRPD, and as well as my country has ratified the optional protocol also, then I can move directly to that committee, right? To that committee under UNCRPD. Means I, who is a citizen of India, if I'm getting neglected by my own legal, mechanism, then I can approach directly to the international platform. But always remember, this is only available to those state parties, citizens whose nations have also ratified optional protocol. India has not ratified optional protocol, not even signed. Second procedure is here: if the country has ratified optional protocol, then the country, the UNCRPD committee can also initiate the inquiries in any matter related to the discrimination or any issue relating to the person with disability of one particular that concerned country. So with this, due to the lack of the time here, I will like to conclude ultimately with one quote: anybody's disability does not hinder my ability to be considered as equal. So if you are having any kind of disability, that does not mean you are not able to get treated equal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a detailed explanation about the topic. It was a great input in today's agenda. And now I would like to introduce all of you to our next speaker, Mr. Kapil Kumar. Mr. Kapil Kumar was born in Bareilly, UP in the year 1983, and when he was 12 years old, due to some accident, he lost his sight and he also lost one of his hand. He did his schooling from Model School for the Visually Handicapped NIVH. In 2004, he came to Delhi for his higher education and did his graduation and post-graduation in POL. SC from Hindu College, University of Delhi. The topic of his doctoral thesis was enhancing the dignity of visually disabled citizens, the role of government and non-governmental institutions in India. He was awarded with his doctorate degree in the year 2018. He is a disability right activist as well as interested in disability studies. He has been at the center of disabled students movement which took place in the year 2012 at Delhi University. He has also been writing various short articles on different aspects of the lives of disabled persons. Currently, he's working at as PGT Pol Science at Guru Gobind Singh College, School of Department of Education, NCT of Delhi. We are so delighted to have you on board with us, sir. So I would like to hand over to Mr. Kapil Kumar.
So, first of all, I would like to correct you. Basically, I'm not working in Guru Gobind College. Basically, I am working as a PGT, postgraduate teacher in Government Boys Senior Secondary School, Department of Education, and City of Delhi, basically, Delhi government. So, first of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for giving me such opportunity to speak on this particular issue on UNCRPD. And I was very much delighted and was very much interested to join this conference because it was totally dependent upon the concept of inclusion. But I'm disheartened that I got opportunity at the last. Basically, the previous speaker of mine, she might have covered almost all the points which I had to cover, but still, I would like to present my points. Thanks to the organizer for giving me opportunity, especially Deepaji and Jayant, who actually called me up and coordinated with me for this basically conference. So before starting and before entering into the detailed discussion about UNCRPD, I would like to share some of the experiences of my own personal life when I was a student and as an employee when I'm working in a school. So as you have mentioned in my intro, like I was a part of disabled students protest in Delhi University. Actually, it was the year 2012 when I organized disabled students protest in Delhi University due to some reasons. Basically, And the slogan of that protest was providing reservation was not enough. We are providing reservation is not enough. We all know that through reservation we get admissions in different colleges of the university, but still there are certain things like accessibility has been a crucial issue, like reading material was not available, that premises, the university campus were not accessible. And that protest started just because one of the girl who was orthopedically handicapped, she got collided with a bike within the premises or within the campus of the university. That actually promoted me, and that actually urged me to organize such protest against the authority. So why I'm sharing this experience, I'll definitely let you know later. Again, now when I joined the job as a TGT in Kendra Vidyalaya, I worked as TGT in Kendra Vidyalaya also. During that time, I faced attitudinal barrier, which is again a hindrance to the inclusion. Like teachers, along with me, my colleagues, they were not that much supportive. And one most important thing which I used to feel being disabled, like whatever work you perform, it has never been given due recognition, which is to be recognized. And later on, when I'm working as a PGT right now, currently I'm working as a PGT in Delhi with this thing, Delhi Government School. So whatever problems I face daily, like while I commute to school, while entering into the school premises, the building, the infrastructure barrier which I face, that actually urges me to think whether the inclusion is really happening, whether inclusion is taking place, or we talk about inclusion a lot, but still there's a lot to be done. So now moving forward, when we are talking about this conference has the theme disability and inclusion. So first of all, I would like to focus upon disability, that what do we mean by disability? What is disability? Is disability natural? But as a matter of fact, when we see disability is not a condition which is natural. Disability is not natural. It is a condition which is imposed by the society due to certain barriers or the hindrances, attitudinal or environment. But as a matter of fact, disability is synonymously used with impairment. During my research time, when I tried to find out the definition of disability, I find nothing about it. I didn't find any definition of disability during that time. Rather, in the major policies, whether of India 1995 Act or PWD Act of 1995 or Mental Health Act or National Trust Act or Rehabilitation Council of India Act, whenever I tried to find out or to locate definition of disability in these acts, what I found that no definition was provided. Rather, the word impairment or handicap was used. Like in 1995 Act, when you see, it was written, yeah, disabled persons, basically visually impaired 40% and above, or orthopedically impaired 40% and above, but no clear definition was provided. And now again, with this UNCRPD, what we see that a social definition based upon social model is provided. When we look into the preamble of the UNCRPD, there was a definition of disability which says that disability is an evolving concept. That is a very positive sign, that disability is an evolving concept which results due to the interaction between persons with impairment and attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinder their full and equal participation and effective participation in the society, which means that disability is not given, disability is not natural. Now, coming back to the term inclusion. Now, what is inclusion? We all know that the philosophy of inclusion rests upon the idea that regardless of disability or ability, caste, creed, gender, whatsoever, when an individual has a right to be incorporated fully in a society, that is called inclusion. It means that inclusion means to include each individual with diverse range of abilities, talents, interests, or lifestyles get participation in a meaningful way in a society. That is called inclusion. But whether it is happening or not, we have to decide upon it. We have to look into it. Now, as today's conference is about UNCRPD, let me just talk about the historical evolution of UNCRPD, how it came into force and why it was required. So we have to go back to 1981, the year 1981. That was the year which was declared the International Year for Disability, disabled persons basically. It was celebrated like that only. And during that year, United Nations General Assembly, what it did, it declared a decade 1981 to 1992 as Persons with Disability Decade. Basically, it has to be celebrated in that way. During that phase, requirement for this sort of convention was first initiated. The discussion for this sort of this thing convention was initiated, and during this phase, during this decade, whatever actions and programs were to be implemented, a review committee was formed up to basically look into the implementation of these actions, whether they were implemented properly or not. An expert committee was set up. Now, this expert committee in 1987, in its report, recommended for such sort of convention by UN in order to reduce, in order to mitigate, in order to remove basically discrimination against persons with disability, their segregation, their exclusion, which they were facing. So they urged that such sort of convention is required so that these types of challenges could be removed or reduced for persons with disabilities in different societies of the world. In that context, Sweden and Italy were the countries basically which presented a framework for such sort of convention, but members of United Nations did not agreed upon it. They all the members they had a view that they had sufficient human rights documents which had to be implemented, basically which were in force, and no new human rights convention was required. Now, in place of it, in 1993, what we see that a document named Standard of Equalization of Opportunities for Persons with Disability was adopted by member countries, but it was not compulsory in nature. It was not compulsive. It was not compulsory for the member countries to implement it in their own countries. So again, in 2000, we see that 5 big non-governmental organizations working in the area of rights for persons with disability, they actually discussed with different governments of the countries to have such convention passed from United Nations so that persons with disability can get recognition to their inherent dignity and rights. So in this context, in 2001, in United Nations General Assembly, Mexico proposed such sort of convention and it was accepted, and such sort of for getting such sort of convention, a committee was formed. Now what we see that in this committee, Mexico and New Zealand played a vital role for getting such convention fastly in existence. And in year 2006, 13 December 2006, we get this convention adopted by United Nations, and this convention was made open for member countries to be signed on 30th March. There was a provision in this convention, basically, like by the time 20 countries do not ratify this convention, it would not be implemented throughout the world. So India ratified this convention on 1st October 2007, and on after getting ratified by 20 member countries, it came into force on 3rd May 2008. So that was the historical evolution of this thing, Uncrpd. So as my previous speaker has already mentioned about different provisions. Still, we have to know, we should know that Uncrpd is divided into 2 parts. First part deals with the preamble, which states the purpose or the objective of framing this treaty. In this particular section, in this particular part, member countries recognize that disabled persons are undertreated, discriminated against, or segregated or excluded, and their dignity and rights have to be ensured. Therefore, they need a treaty. This is only the part within the preamble itself. We find a clear-cut definition of disability, about which I was talking, that it was totally based upon social model. One thing which I wanted to clear here is that before Uncrpd is the first human rights treaty of 21st century for persons with disability. Right. So before Uncrpd, all the policies which were in existence, basically, they had the conceptual background on medical model, which has been totally clarified by my earlier speaker, that what is medical model? Medical model tries to assess or to measure the impairment of an individual, and that may be for many reasons, like it could be used for treatment, for diagnosis and treatment, but it can also be used by governmental institutions for providing relaxations and concessions. Because for that, you need to know that what sort of impairment, how much impairment a person has, and how much assistance or requirement does this person require. Okay, so That was a point which I wanted to make during within this preamble. Then comes the second section, basically, which is a set of 50 articles, which I would like to go briefly. First article actually talks about ensuring full and equal human rights and fundamental freedom, and also to protect inherent dignity and autonomy of an individual, basically person with disability. So again, this 50 set of these 50 set of articles, actually what they wanted to say within this 50 articles, objective of the UNCRPD, purpose of the UNCRPD, how it has to be implemented, and how to make its effective implementation and monitoring. Those all things have been mentioned. Article 1 I've already mentioned. Again, in Article 2 we see that Article 2, Article 3, and all the articles, they talk about general principles, obligations, women with disabilities, children with disabilities. They talk about accessibility. Accessibility is the prime thing which has a great role to play in the lives of persons with disability. We, being disabled, always face challenges, and those can be reduced by getting accessible material, accessible paths, accessible environment. And one more attractive thing which was there in UNCRPD was about awareness raising. Awareness is very much important within the society, because the most important barrier, the biggest barrier which we face from the society is attitudinal, along with infrastructure. This attitudinal means stereotypes which persons have about persons with disability. These actually play a vital role. Why they don't participate in cultural life, why they don't participate in social aspects of means all sorts of social life. That is the biggest hindrance which we face. So awareness raising to various media, through various ways they are mentioned in this convention. And again, focuses upon education of persons with disability. We know that with quality education we can get a dignified life. How education can be made accessible? Here the term reasonable accommodation is very well mentioned, which was mentioned in Article 2 of UNCPD. Basically, some of the definitions or the concepts which have been defined in Article 2, like reasonable accommodation, non-discrimination, or universal design. These are the concepts which are the heart core, which plays a vital role in the lives of persons with disability. So this convention has dealt in detail with all these concepts. So education in Article 24, which is mentioned, it is very crucial for the persons with disabilities, basically, because after getting good quality education, we become eligible for good employment. And you know that with employment, we get a status high in the society. And if we become employed, we can also take care of our family, and what a number of persons with disabilities are doing right now. In this convention, they also talk about home and family rights, interdependent independency, community participation in community life. Then again, we see that work and employment is also there. Again, the striking point, the striking article of this UNCRPD is the cultural participation here, cultural, recreational, leisure, and sport. Like this aspect of human life was all the time missing from all the concepts, from all the conventions and treaty earlier. Basically, it is also a very basic right, as my previous speaker spoke. Like this is a basic right which we tend to ignore, but it plays a vital role in the development of humans' personality. So enjoyment is a basic right which is provided, which is stressed upon within this UNCRPD. When they talk about making television accessible, when they talk about making theater accessible, to give importance to innovation and creativity of persons with disability, this all is mentioned over here. So in a sense, and the later 20 articles which are there, they are about international cooperation or making formation of committee of for monitoring this, for implementing and monitoring this convention throughout different societies of the world, and also about the amendment, how amendments can be suggested and how they can be incorporated within convention. So basically, what I believe, like all the aspects of human life have been covered within this convention, and after adopting and implementing these all provisions positively and with true spirit, I think that we can get an inclusive society in true sense. What I believe, that an ideal society or inclusive society could be one where the difference of all persons could be given due recognition, where difference is considered as diversity, not deviation, then only we can expect that the world can become a proper place to live in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very detailed and practical understanding of the Act. I now ask the participants if there are any questions that they need to ask to the speakers. Please send those messages in the chat, or you can unmute to speak. Yes, I see Rudrashish Mondal's hand raising.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
So this is Rudrasis from Odisha.
Hi, Rudrash.
My question to Kapil sir, which is in central school, you know. So you see, in central school there are criteria to enter. The first of all is the central government employee. If there is uh, a, a student whose father is in private job and he is a disabled person, so how could you manage to uh, get that student admitted in central school? This is first one. You see, because you see, need to work on them because they did. And for awareness, what are you doing, sir? There, in spite of your job role there to teach. I don't know, of course, besides teaching, what you are doing there. Still, if you are just raising an awareness to the disabled persons, so that you can get more and more, because while I was in a month, more than a month of training with uh, in several project organized by collaborated with Tata Trust and Enable India. While in that training, I was being I got an opportunity to uh, organize a workshop with the children of a school and an university. So in that school, there was a boy of class 9 who was at the age of 20, and he said, "Sir, my father was working in Surat." He was very sad to say that my father was working in Surat and I was in the village, and I did not get this information that there is a school for me, and I got it late. I am 20 and I am studying in class 9. What I do that? So of course, I, uh, I I told him to be associated with the Hamari Bani and all those things. That is later thing. So along with your sir profession there in central school, uh, what others work for this for the disabled sector? What you are doing there?
So actually, when I was working in central school as TGT, means I used to teach up to 10 standards. Among my colleagues, I used to create awareness. Like still in Kendriya Vidyalaya or central school, they are just implementing 3% reservation for persons with disabilities, and they're too in words, not practically, right? So I just objected these things and wanted to write in written. Means basically, I used to give in written that why not implementing these issues, why not implementing these provisions. And when there was a special case of any student, basically any disabled person has to come to 9th standard or to 10th standard, what I used to do, because there is a provision by CBSE that they can choose special subjects, different subjects from non-disabled students. So they were not aware of that. I used to just guide them accordingly, and whatsoever requirements were there, which were used, which were basically needed by the disabled person, I used to just make them aware about that. And time to time I just used to interact with those students who were disabled and were studying over there, because they used to get demoralized. So at that time I used to impart them some counseling. I just gave them some time so that they can feel good and can participate in different activities of the school.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else with a question? Or we could proceed towards the end of the session.
Yes, Anuja, we can, because I think there is a no.
Okay, sure, sir. Vishwas?
Okay, so thank you, sir, for such detailed explanation. Now I would like to request Dr. Pooja Arora, ma'am, to take over the session and present the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible, please.
Yes. Our honorable guest, respected colleagues from Hansraj College, Bhumika Trust, Center for Disability Studies, Gujarat, and National Law University, Gandhinagar, and very wonderful participants. A very good and warm afternoon to all of you. It's great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this special and informative session on disability rights and advocacy for the International Conference on Disability and Inclusion. First and foremost, I start by giving glory to the Almighty God for making today's session a resounding success. We heartily thank our speakers, Dr. V. Muralidharan, who indicated the real issue, that is, the need of true data collection for people with disabilities and the facility provided to them with respect to education and medical. We really appreciate the session by Mr. Rahul Bajaj, who explained laws and right of disability in very simple manner, citing very interesting and recent examples. We heartily thank Dr. Sandhya for her wonderful session on women disability. Talk by Dr. Neha Aneja on United Nations rights for the person with physical disability was very comprehensive and insightful. Next, there was a talk by Mr. Kapil Kumar, who shared his views on disability and inclusion and the real problems faced by person with disability using example from his personal life as well. I believe the session has given a food for thought to all of us. A very special and big thanks to all our participants for their kind attention and cooperation during the session. I just want to say be strong, stay safe, and stay happy, especially in this tough time, and wish and pray to the Almighty for well beings of everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for wonderful vote of thanks.
Thank you, Arun Kumar, for the live caption.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arun Kumar, for live caption.
Thank you so much, ma'am.